When I first met Kamau, it wasn't in some dramatic or movie-like moment. It was a sunny afternoon in Nairobi, the kind of day when the city feels alive with possibilities. I was late for a meeting, rushing through Kimathi Street, clutching my coffee and a file that was already starting to slip from my hands. That's when he appeared, calm, collected, and annoyingly composed, as if the chaos of the city didn't touch him at all. He caught my file before it hit the ground and smiled in that easy, confident way of his. From that day, things just flowed naturally. Kamau worked in tech, full of ideas about innovation and change, and I was in communications, always chasing stories and meaning. We were both dreamers in our own way. I liked how he spoke about life, simple but deep, how he believed that people could make their own paths without being tied down by what the world expected. He thought traditions were beautiful but not something to be chained by. I agreed. Our relationship grew between shared coffees, long walks in Karura Forest, and late-night talks about life, family, and the future. Nairobi has a way of making love feel like an adventure. We would sit in traffic, laughing at nothing, sharing roasted maize, and imagining where we'd be in 10 years. Kamau always said, "We'll make our own story, wanjiku, one that's ours alone." We both came from families that held different beliefs. My parents were firm about traditions. My father, Muriithi, often reminded me that culture was the thread that held people together. Kamau's family, on the other hand, was modern to the core. His mother always said, "This is a new age, we can't live as if we're still in the 1950s. I didn't think much about how those two worlds would clash, not then at least. Looking back now, it's almost funny how simple everything seemed in those first months. We were young, in love, and unstoppable. We thought our love could solve anything, that understanding each other was enough. When Kamau told me one evening that he wanted to marry me, I didn't even hesitate. The world around us faded, and all I could think of was how right it felt. If anyone had told me that something as old-fashioned as bride price could change everything, I would have laughed. We were modern people after all. But love, I've learned, has a way of testing everything you think you know, especially when the past isn't done speaking. Kamau proposed on an ordinary Thursday evening, the kind of night when I least expected anything special to happen. We had gone to a small restaurant tucked away in Kilimani, one of those quiet places with soft lighting and music that hums gently in the background. I remember teasing him for being too quiet that night. He kept stirring his drink, smiling to himself in a way that made me suspicious. When the waiter brought dessert, there it was, a small velvet box hidden beside the plate. I froze, and for a moment I just stared at him. Kamau looked nervous, which was rare for him. His voice trembled slightly when he said, "Wanjiku, will you let me walk this life with you?" I didn't cry, though my heart felt too full for words. I said yes, of course, and the restaurant staff, who had clearly been watching, clapped as he slipped the ring on my finger. It wasn't a grand proposal, but it was perfect. Just us, simple and sincere. The next weekend we went home to share the news with my family. My mother, Nyambura, was thrilled. She hugged Kamau and welcomed him warmly. My father, Muriithi, on the other hand, listened quietly. He nodded once, then said, "That is good news, but I hope you both know what comes next." Kamau smiled politely and said he wanted a small wedding soon, maybe even a civil one in Nairobi. My father's smile faded. "You cannot skip Ratio," he said firmly. "No marriage can be blessed without it." Kamau shifted uneasily, glancing at me for support. "With respect, Baba, times have changed. Wanjiku and I have agreed that what matters is love and commitment, not old customs." The silence that followed was heavy. My father's eyes darkened. "Love does not erase where we come from," he said. "Without the bride price you have no standing before the ancestors. It is not a purchase, Kamau, it is respect." My mother tried to ease the tension, but I could tell the damage was done. Later that evening, when we visited Kamau's family, the discussion came up again. His mother waved her hand dismissively and said, "Those old traditions are just ways to control people. You two are educated, don't let anyone drag you backward." Hearing both sides made my heart sink. I could see how proud my father was, how much he valued our roots, and yet I also understood Kamau's desire to build something new. Between them, I felt torn, standing at the thin line between the past and the future. That night, Kamau told me we should follow our hearts. "We don't need ceremonies to prove our love," he said softly. "We'll do things our way." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that love alone would be enough. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet unease stirred, a feeling that the story wasn't going to be as simple as we hoped. The arguments didn't stop. Every time Kamau and I went home, it turned into another round of lectures about tradition, respect, and the right way to do things. My father said we were rushing, my mother pleaded with me to listen, and my uncles called to remind me of our people's ways. Kamau tried to stay patient, but I could see the frustration building in him. One evening, after another heated conversation with my father, Kamau sighed and said, "Wanjiku, how long will we keep explaining ourselves? We love each other. Isn't that enough?" His words hit something inside me. I was too tired of walking on eggshells, of trying to please everyone. We wanted to begin our lives together, but it felt like the world wouldn't let us. So one night over dinner we made a decision that felt both brave and reckless. We would have a civil wedding. No dowry discussions. No elders, just us and a few close friends. The day itself was simple but beautiful. I wore a cream dress, Kamau wore a dark suit, and the registrar's office felt surprisingly peaceful. When we exchanged vows, I felt free, like we had taken control of our story. For a while it seemed like everything was finally falling into place. Afterward, our friends posted the photos online. The comments came quickly. Some people congratulated us, others whispered their disapproval. "So they skipped Ratio," one cousin asked under a photo. "What will the ancestors say?" another wrote. I tried not to care, but the murmurs grew louder. Even my mother stopped calling for a few days. Then one morning my father sent a short message: "You have walked alone. May your path teach you." Those words stayed in my mind long after I read them. Weeks later, we heard that the council of elders from our village had gathered. They sent a messenger to Nairobi, an elderly man named Gathanga, who delivered their warning calmly. He stood outside our apartment door, holding his walking stick, and said, "Children, when you turn your back on the roots that raised you, the wind will remind you where you came from." Kamau thanked him politely and closed the door, muttering that people were overreacting. But that night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the look in the old man's eyes, something between sadness and pity. I told myself it was just superstition, that nothing bad could come from love. Yet somewhere deep inside, a shadow of doubt began to form, soft but steady, like a whisper waiting to be heard. The first few weeks after the wedding felt like a dream. Kamau and I settled into our small apartment in Lavington, surrounded by laughter, new furniture, and the kind of peace that comes when you finally get what you've been fighting for. We cooked together, watched movies late into the night, and made plans for the future. It felt like we had silenced every voice that had doubted us. Kamau's business was doing well, and I had just been promoted at work. My father's silence still lingered, but I told myself time would heal that. We were happy, or at least we believed we were. Then the small things began. It started with the lights. They would flicker every few nights, even when there was no power problem in the building. Kamau laughed it off, saying it was a wiring issue, but it kept happening, always around the same time, just before midnight. Next, his car started breaking down. Once, twice, then 3 times in the same week. Mechanics couldn't find anything wrong with it. Every time he tried to leave for an early meeting, the engine would stall. But when someone else tried, it started perfectly. I brushed it off too, but then the dreams came. At first they were hazy, just flashes of a river at night, a flickering lantern, and soft singing in the background. Then they grew clearer. I began to see old women in tattered shawls, standing by the riverbank, their faces hidden but their weeping unmistakable. One night I woke up trembling. I told Kamau what I'd seen, but he only pulled me close and said it was stress, that I needed rest. Still, the dreams didn't stop. Each time the river felt closer, the crying louder, as if calling me by name. One morning I found wet footprints on the floor near the bedroom window. Kamau said it must have been the rain, but it hadn't rained that night. I laughed nervously and told myself not to think too much about it. Yet deep down, something in me knew it wasn't just bad luck or coincidence. It felt like someone or something was trying to speak to us. The peace we had fought for so stubbornly was beginning to unravel, one quiet, eerie moment at a time.